Okay, welcome again to Social Distillation, a submarine still of the internet, where we attempt to drop the bead and pour white lightning straight onto your brain. Today is Wheel of Time Day, back to the Shadow Rising. So these next several chapters are pretty interesting, but I don't think there's a ton to talk about unless you have some thoughts. A lot of it is stuff we've kind of talked about before because it's just more of Jordan layering on that character development, especially this first one where we left off on chapter 4. Strings is where we're at, and so after the action around the bubble of evil, it suddenly shifts to Thom just having a quiet evening in his own quarters. But you see,
we're kind of completing the circle of his character almost.
Yeah,
because there's something more to him, but now it's like, oh, that's what he is.
And we found out a little bit of his past, and now we see it fully in action. I mean, he's
partly because we can see it in his eyes, in his mind.
Yeah.
And back to some of our earlier points, this is one part of the book where we kind of overanalyze a lot of things, but this is one part of the book where it makes it abundantly clear that they're stuck because of Ta'veren, and mainly Rand's, because it's more visible when it's Rand's than it's their own thoughts, because they're justifying in their own head why they're making a decision. Whereas when they just can't get away, it's like, well, we've got something pulling our string.
Yeah. And well, but for Thom, he still has this strong connection to the boys, especially Rand. And so we see that from his perspective here, that he's just he feels a fool for doing this for something that happened 15 years ago, as he thinks, but he doesn't want to leave Rand alone. He doesn't want to leave him just to Moiraine. He wants him to be able to kind of stand up for himself. So he's playing in the shadows, and we see just how good he is at the game of houses. Just in this one little scene, this one little perspective, where he's, just as he thinks right there in that first paragraph, the High Lord Carleon himself would have thought it was his own hand. So he's that good of a forger, and he's thinking about how he's going to, place this note so it does what he wants it to do without, seeming obvious or drawing attention. So we get that, but then when Mat shows up, we also, it shifts from him being so good at the game of houses to him as a person. The way he's thinking through trying to help Mat, but also trying to help Rand, because he recognizes that Mat is stuck. He's not going to say that because he knows
he was going to say it, and Mat cuts him off, and he changes tactic mid-sentence.
And he very smoothly shifts, like he was always going to say, because he's your friend. But so he knows Mat is stuck. He knows why. So he's spinning. He's telling us stories. That's why the Gleeman is the perfect guise for him, because it lets him chat amiably, and people expect it. So he's giving guidance as best he can, knowing that Mat is stuck and Mat doesn't want to hear that, but also knowing that he's smart enough to know that Rand needs Mat. He doesn't know. I mean, he's seen some of Mat's Ta'verenness personally, but he doesn't fully, I think, know all the abilities that Mat has and just how strongly Ta'veren he is. So I think he's also playing Mat, but you see that it's in a very different way than Moiraine does. That it really is a personable, friendly way. We have all had the friend in a toxic relationship and tried to figure out how to talk them out of it in a friendly way, and it's hard.
Some of us have the brother in that, and
Yes, well,
you know how that always ends up. You just don't end up talking to them anymore, not by your own choice.
yeah. Uh, but Thom just very easily, just very, just ever so slightly nudges Matt, and then all of a sudden he's not ranting about leaving anymore. So, but he's, you know, he's gonna spin a yarn. He's gonna play stones with him. Um, he's not gonna push or prod him like Moiraine does. I like that these next several chapters keep jumping to different perspectives.
Mhm.
So you know, so we're starting a new book here. It's been a while if you're reading in real time, and we've just had a big chunk of stuff happen in the Dragon Reborn. So I like that we are not only getting reacquainted with all of these main characters, but getting more depth about them now that the story, as we kind of talked about, the first three books are kind of their own arc. They're kind of their own act one, and now we're starting a new act. The plot is definitely thick, or plots, really, plural, is the other thing we're seeing here, is that there are plots. And so that's all getting thicker and more complex. And so we're getting deeper into these characters to get to know how complex they are. So we switch to the girls, and it's from Egwene's perspective to begin with.
Yeah, I don't think there's a whole lot meaningful in this chapter other than you're just kind of getting an idea of where they're going to go.
Yeah. So they're still chasing after the Black Ajah. That they're not giving up on that. And then we're given this Tanchico or false dragons. Who's telling the truth, or are either of them, and where do we go and what do we do? And then even though we don't get it from her perspective, the end of this scene here, and then the next chapter gives us an interesting insight into Moiraine, because typically, or so far, we don't see what happens after she's done her little calm, mysterious Aes Sedai thing. Because we don't really see her alone. We've seen it a few times where she's talking to Lan and trying to puzzle things out. But now she's just left Rand. She was doing her, mysterious Aes Sedai thing, trying to goad him and push him in the direction she wants. And she leaves serenely, and then she comes back in, slamming open a door and yelling about Rand being a stubborn, mule-headed man.
Is this the first time we get Elayne's perspective?
I do believe it is.
Yeah. Now we did have a comment from Scott on the stubbornness of the two rivers and talking about men talking about them, but now we get Nyneave just saying it out loud. That's how we make them.
Yep. We never have a problem with them. Oh, really?
Oh, really? Again, a little tribalism. She wants to box Rand's ears, but as soon as Moiraine says something, it's like, no, not your job.
Which we saw at the very beginning when Nyneave showed up in Baerlon, and after her talk with Moiraine, and then when she talks to Rand alone, I mean, she says that it's, we're two rivers folk and we need to stick together out here. So I'm not gonna let her see any any doubt or conflict between us. But then Egwene is still kind of reflexively pushing back against Nynaeve's temper. She just kind of automatically plays the peacemaker here in the middle. I think the most interesting thing about this chapter, because it is from Elayne's perspective, is when, well, a couple of interesting things. It is interesting that even though they're not full Aes Sedai, and even if they were, Moiraine would still be Moiraine. But it is interesting that she divulges her plans to them, because typically she's so very closed. I mean, both her and Sawan, that's why they get into trouble with other sisters. It is one of the very few things the series actually did well, is when Moiraine goes back to the tower and there's a lot of grumbling from the other sisters because she's so she's away from the tower so much and so secretive about what it is that she's doing, and it causes a lot of tension and concern because every Aes Sedai thinks she knows best. So it is interesting, and you could wonder if it's a slip in her character, or if there's.
Well, Elayne talks about she's never seen her so flustered, basically.
That's a good point. She is acting a little bit out of character because she has been unnerved a little bit by Rand, because she can't treat Rand like she normally treats people. Even before the end of the Eye of the World, when he kind of came into his power, and then when she told him he was the Dragon Reborn, he started being more stubborn and hard to lead then. But even before then, in the Eye of the World, she knows how difficult it is to get these Two Rivers boys, especially Rand, to do what she wants.
Well, we always talk about the rapid onset of all this trauma for the kids. Now let's look at it from Moiraine's perspective.
That's a good point.
She's also young for an Aes Sedai, and because it was 20 years ago that the foretelling was, and she wasn't accepted.
It was the day before she was going to be raised.
Yeah. And then basically since then, for 20 years, she's had this one goal. She's gotten to the kind of the linchpin point of that goal, and then nothing's going as planned. Everything's happening as it should be, but not in the way she wanted it to. She was going to guide him through the prophecies and make sure he did it right and not kill himself, and like Lan would say, cut off your foot with a sword. And
there have been some pretty darn close calls since then. She was nearly killed by that Drakkar in the Great Hunt. They stumbled straight into Ilion into Samael when they were in Ilion.
And even as an Aes Sedai, you're probably scared shitless of a Forsaken.
As well you should be. So, and then Balal at the end of the Dragon Reborn, and then she gets smacked down by Balsamon when he shows up. So that's a good point, that not only are things not going as planned, and it's becoming more and more difficult to execute her plans, she's had some really close calls, and even worse from her mind, because I think it's fair to say that, and she says that a close call for her is one thing, but the close calls for Rand, I think, are what was really unnerving her. And actually, now that you mentioned that, she makes that point here that when I was about to get to her plans, is when Nyneave exclaims that, you want him to start a war. He's not that much of a fool, even for a man, or something to that effect. And Moraine's response is, do you want him to go herring off alone again? That's why she has plans. That's why she's trying to push him, to lead him in a particular direction, because I think that was the real close call, was those months chasing down after Rand and having no idea what was happening to him and if he was okay. And then to get to the end and have him have to face off against, against Balsamon without her, and another close call for him there. And I think that's really what unnerves her.
Well, I mean, again, and we also add the latest close call, which was basically the pattern
Yeah.
unraveling enough for him to almost die again.
Yeah. As she says, what happened to Rand? He almost died. Where was it? Oh yeah, there is the moment there with before we get to Moiraine's plans about Egwene and Elayne basically passing Rand off between them. There is this weird moment here. Put a pin in this and remind me when we get to spoilers. Where on page 126, where Moiraine says, I could wager I know the face of the man I will marry better than either of you knows that of your future husband. That's an interesting statement.
What was the page?
126. Because of things that we know that happened down the road.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, wait, no, I think I know where that must come from. Okay, yeah, we'll talk about that later. Duh, yeah. Yeah. Okay, so anyway, then what I was getting to was I think after Moraine's, personality and character development there from Elayne's perspective here, then we actually get to some real depth from Elayne, because she can seem, because she is so young, she can still seem girly and silly and naive. But she's really very sharp, as well as having been trained and taught from an early age. So she sees right away, just from a few sentences by Moiraine, and then she suddenly sees basically her whole plan and goes, oh, I get it, even though she doesn't want to get it, because it's disconcerting. Yeah, page 130 is I like Nyneave's response to Moiraine, because you get more of, she's not just being contrarian here. She's not just being naive about in her reflexive revulsion of Moiraine wanting Rand to start a war. War used to be something I heard about from peddlers, something far away that I didn't really understand. I know what it is now. Men killing men, men behaving like animals, reduced to animals, villages burned, farms and fields burned, hunger, disease, and death for the innocent as the guilty. What makes this war of yours any better, Moiraine? What makes it any cleaner? She's a healer. She has a reflexive disgust for anything that would bring about such suffering. And they went walking through, well, they sailed down past Karheen during the Civil War and then went walking through it. So as she says, she's now seen it firsthand. And that's her. So Moraine's focus is the macro. is on the greater good. But Nyneave is resistance against, how could something be good if it causes this? Because she's looking on the smaller scale. And rather than answering, Elayne, Moiraine said quietly. She shook her head. She did not want to be the one to explain this, but she was not sure even her mother sitting on the lion throne could have kept silent under Moiraine's compelling dark-eyed stare. And then not only does she lays it out, but she knows the full story, but then clamps shut because there was more to it, but she would not tell them that part. Moiraine was not so reticent. Very good, she said, nodding, yet incomplete. The look she gave Elayne said she knew Elayne had left out what she had on purpose. So Elayne sees that there's going to be war one way or another. So Rand might as well go on the offensive, and he might as well choose his own wars at his own time, and it will seal these nations to him. And it will make him strong enough because,
well, and we talked about her being flustered about plans.
Mm-hmm.
She's still continuing to push the square peg in the round hole here. We can control the outcome, but for all her talk about the pattern, the wheel weaves as the will wills, she's trying to impose her will,
right?
Because that's what's best.
Because this is what the tower does. The tower schemes and manipulates and tries to, from their perspective, keep the world, the known world, this continent here, keep it together as best as possible. And Moiraine recognizes, and this is what Elayne sees, is that no matter the signs, no matter the prophecies, there are going to be countries. I mean, Amadicia for sure, because it's run by the White Cloaks, but then how many other rulers are just going to convince themselves this is a lie or a trick or it's not real, and he's just another false dragon? Because they're not going to want to, as we've said over and over, part of Rand's psychosis is the fact that he's the villain of the story in his own mind. So that's how other people are going to see him too. And what ruler is going to want to willingly follow him and submit to him? And so he's going to have to show strength. He's going to have power behind him. What's interesting to me is that Moiraine sees that he's going to have more than just the tower, because she knows that, and we saw from her conversation with Swan, the plan was you bring him to the White Tower, and then we start contacting all the nation's rulers to let them know that the dragon has been reborn, and we, the White Tower, are guiding him and preparing him for the last battle. And now let's get all the nations united behind him. And Moiraine is at least recognizing that that's going to have to be modified, because he needs his own strength behind him so that those missives from the White Tower will carry more weight. Ugh. Was that yeah. And then she she has a page 131. He has decided to find out for himself what the prophecies of the dragon say. Moraine's face remained cool and smooth, but suddenly she sounded almost as tired as Elayne felt. They may have been proscribed in Tyr, but the chief librarian had 9 different translations in a locked chest. Rand has them all now. I pointed out the verse that applies here, and he quoted it to me from an old Kandori translation. Power of the shadow made human flesh, wakened in turmoil, strife, and ruin. The reborn one, marked and bleeding, dances the sword in dreams and mist, chains the shadow sworn to his will, from the city lost and forsaken, leads the spears to war once more, breaks the spears and makes them see, truth long hidden in the ancient dream. And she points out how her interpretation of this, it applies to this as well as it does to anything. Ilian under Samael is surely a forsaken city. Lead the Terran spears to war, change Samael, and he has fulfilled the verse. The ancient dream of the dragon reborn, but he will not see it, blah, blah, blah. Okay, well, but it's not too spoilery to say that's not what that verse is applying to. We will find out later. So keep that verse in mind if this is your first read through. But if you're overthinking everything, as you should when you read these books, you'll notice there are sections of that verse that she completely ignores. She picks out the parts that apply the way she wants them to apply and says, look, see, these are the prophecies. Let's do this. Except it doesn't quite fit. You're trying to make it fit.
See also our other episodes on cognitive dissonance and cherry picking data.
Yeah. So there's a lot of that, and we'll see. Well, we've seen a little bit so far. I think one of the first times we see this is when Rand finds Thom in Karheen, and he points out the verse about the markings of the herring, and markings of dragons is in that verse as well. Even though we don't know yet what that means, but we've seen that before of people trying to figure out what this obscure poetic language means and using it to guide them. And it rarely works because of, as you say, you're cherry picking and you've got your own cognitive dissonance. So, and it's actually explained a few times, here and there of the language of foretelling is necessarily vague because the future is full of possibility. And so even if you're seeing something, how it comes about is still kind of in flux. So I think that's explained at a couple different points. I can't think of a specific example off the top of my head, but I think that's Jordan trying to walk the line between free will and predestination.
Mm-hmm. Which again is one of the themes of the whole book.
Mm-hmm.
Which we're going to get to in the spoilers, because thoughts on Tavaren based on some Jordan interviews that I found.
Oh, cool.
And the book, the big book that I have, plus just our insights on character traits.
So there's a principle in storytelling. I believe it's called Chekhov's gun. As from a playwright who had the philosophy that you don't have pointless things in your storytelling. So if you have a gun hanging on the wall in Act 1, then somebody better use it by the end of the play. I agree and disagree with that, and that's where the overthinking for the Wheel of Time comes from, because Jordan uses that principle a lot. Here we find out about the doorways. So these things are obviously a big effing deal, so they're going to get used at some point, and possibly some point soon. Because Moiraine is getting desperate for answers and getting desperate for trying to get Rand to move the way she thinks he needs to move. But then Jordan will also, he will also use those things either as intentional red herrings or just as elements of the world that don't necessarily go anywhere. They're just there. That's just part of the world. So it's what leads to a lot of this overthinking. But with those doorways, I can see how, especially in her off balance state, how Moiraine would divulge her plans to the girls, because one, they're part of this, and two, they are still only accepted, so she can lead them, she can bully them if she needs to. So she can reveal her plans to them so that they can help, and she can use them to help with her plans. I do find it odd and can't think of a reason from her perspective why in the world she told them about the doorways. Because that just seems like something. I mean, why in the world would you tell Accepted about this thing? Because
Well,
that
we
is,
could simplify it, and it's because she's unhinged and is just blurting everything
yeah.
out at this moment because she seems to be. Or we could also attribute it to Rand. Remember, people say things and do things that they wouldn't normally do because of him.
My best guess is this is demonstrating the strength of will and personality of the three girls, because they kind of, I mean, Elayne specifically basically, puts her foot down, because it's page 132, because she's about to brush them off. Um, So am I desperate, Moiraine said firmly. I have dedicated my life to finding him, and I will not let him fail if I can prevent it. I am almost desperate enough to, she broke off, pursing her lips. Let it be enough that I will do what I must. So to your point, that does seem that's just part of her being unbalanced. But it isn't enough, Egwene said sharply. What is it you'll do? You have other matters to concern you, I said. The Black Ajah. So she's brushing them off. So maybe it is just that the girls are that forceful and determined. So, she decides, all right, if you're that strong of will and determination, then I'll let you know. No, Elayne's voice was knife-edged and commanding, her knuckles a hard white where she gripped her soft blue skirts. You keep many secrets, Moiraine, but tell us this. What do you mean to do to him? Okay, now that I read it out loud, I think she tells them because she doesn't want them putting themselves against her. I think she sees that they have a personal connection to Rand. And so if they think she means him harm, then however much she may think them incapable of foiling her plans, she doesn't want to have to deal with them as an obstacle. So I think she tells them just so they'll know I'm not going to do anything to him. That this is something I may do to myself because I'm that desperate to find answers. Do you have any more thoughts on that before we get to chapter 7?
Just a little tidbit. We get another example of a little fairy tale that is turning out to be true when she immediately thought of a story.
Yeah. There are a lot of those.
Which actually, at this point, someone like Matt, with his pattern recognizing mind, or maybe one of the girls, should have started putting that together and been like, what else? What other these things can tell us how to do stuff? Because so many of these fairy tales that I know seem to be true.
We kind of start to get that with a character that I will not name.
I know. I think I know who you're talking about.
Actually, I think we meet her in this book at first, don't we? Because we meet her while they're in Tanchico. So I think we're going to meet her here later in this book. So we start to get that with her. But it does take them a while to put it together, which actually leads into one of my main thoughts from chapter 7. There's some interesting thoughts here with the relationship and, Elayne basically going to court Rand. uh, and being foot dragging about it, as it says right there at the opening. But the most interesting and kind of infuriating thing to me from this chapter is something that persists through the whole series, that, to your point, someone should have been able to see this. Surely, that the symbol for Aes Sedai is the yin yang symbol, and it's a major theme in Jordan's work, but nobody ever seems to see that and use that to their advantage. So when they go to Rand, the pretense is we're going to try and help you if we can, see if we can learn about Sidon and find a way to help you channel, even though we can't teach you as we could teach a woman. So, but let's see if we can share some knowledge at the very least to help you find your own way. And
someone does figure it out, but that's for the spoiler section. I just wrote down too.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm wondering. Okay. But just right from the beginning, talking about how they embrace the source, and Rand looks at them funny. I don't embrace, I grab hold. It's in just about everything where we have an example of, sometimes it's a totally different technique, but most of the time it's an inverse. It's yin and yang. Okay. The female half, you surrender and embrace the source, and it's often described as a river, and you direct the current by going with the current.
It's Tai Chi versus Wusu.
Exactly. The male half is a raging river or a raging storm, and you have to grab hold of it and hold on tight as you push it in the direction you want it to go when you weave. And they don't see that, even when Egwene is has a personal example, when he lights everything on fire and then puts out the heat. When he puts out the flames, how did you do that? Well, he kind of shrugs, and I didn't really even think about it, because he doesn't have to think much when he uses fire, that I just pushed the heat into the fireplace, because that's what a fireplace does. It absorbs the heat. It wouldn't even notice all that heat. And Egwene flinches because she once did the same thing to a lamp and burnt her whole arm. And Sheriam had to heal her. It was so bad. So a woman is going to do the inverse of that. She has a personal example of, this is what happens when a woman does this, but this is exactly what a man would do. And it never dawns on them, at least not here. And I'm curious for the spoiler section, because I'm trying to think. I'm distracting myself by trying to think of what that example is.
Okay, shelf it. I got it written down.
Okay, so this chapter, and then the next chapter, I like that it switches to Elayne.
I will have to say, we have to put all that to bed and just kind of toss these books out, because the show says there's no difference between the male and female half of the source. Did I just ruin your day?
I mean, it's early yet. I'm sure it could get worse. So I like the next chapter switches to her perspective, but these two chapters together, positive and negative here for me. I like the way that Elayne and Rand's relationship begins. It's a little bit awkward, but they're young. It's very natural, especially with the amount of time that Egwene and Elayne have spent together and all they've been through together. It's natural that Elayne would have been hesitant and worried that Egwene still has feelings for Rand. So Egwene going and making it clear that I no longer have any romantic feelings for him, and you are one of my best friends now. I want to help you with this. So that's natural. It's, it's adorable that there's some puppy love awkwardness there with Elayne and Rand. The negative is I just don't know that it's enough to establish a relationship that's going to persist. And I think, even if it's your first read through, this is going to persist because Rand has already been thinking about Elayne. He has thought about her since he first met her, just that one brief time in the Eye of the World.
Well, we could go into all the brain chemicals that would make this possible, but
Yeah,
in this world, we also have the pattern.
we do. You also have a very different, in this kind of culture, in this kind of day and age, that this kind of medieval setting, you also have a very different conception of romance, courting someone, relationships. I mean,
Yeah, we get a little spoiled with Hinge at our fingertips and Tinder.
yeah,
where if it just doesn't spark right away, then you can find 100 other people that are within your parameters of what you would date.
and you still basically have arranged marriages here, even when they don't seem arranged, as we get in that great scene with in The Great Hunt, when Loyal is talking about the way mothers arrange marriages for Ogier, and oh, we don't do it that way as humans. And Rand goes, I don't know about that, and starts thinking about his relationship with Egwene and how that all came about. And that's kind of what's happening here, except instead of their mothers, it's, her friend.
Well, and also we're dealing with, again, we're at the edges of the bell curve on a lot of things.
Yeah, true.
She's one of the most beautiful young women in this whole world, basically, plus smart, plus capable, plus all those other attractive
Plus a
things.
literal princess, and you have a farm boy here who is
and on
loves
his
to
end,
read stories.
he may be a farm boy, but he is also one of the most physically impressive people she's ever seen. Even being Gawain and Galad's brother.
He's also coming
and
into
he's coming into his capableness. He's
as the Dragon Reborn, which is basically an emperor.
He's above average intelligence. He's all of these things that are attractive. Yeah. So when you look at the attractive meter, they're both well above average. Again, at the tail of the bell curve.
It just, we're not going to. I don't want to get too much into it, but it just would have been nice if we would have had a little bit more along the way. It's kind of to our perennial commenter Scott, as he pointed out, a couple episodes ago. Do you feel like Jordan sometimes forgot about characters because he has so many, and because he has so many, and because they're off doing major important plot points, they don't come together very often, or as often as I think they could have and should have, to really strengthen those character bonds. It's kind of one of my complaints that I made early on about the three boys, is that dynamic of the three of them together in the first two books is great, and it's what makes all three of them so good so quickly, so memorable so quickly.
Let me go ahead and piss you off. Okay, so I threw one out there. We'll throw another one out there based on the show. So what we have here with them canoodling around corners is a build up to that sexual tension that never happens at this moment. And then they're for those that are reading, that end up in a long distance relationship at some point without the benefit of letters and phone calls. So you've had that tension point that gets reached here. So it's long enough to reach that. And then it's cut off, but not with a breakup. It's cut off with, we have to be apart. That's going to create a greater tension.
Yeah.
So they're probably going to screw that up in the show, and they're going to meet and fuck and
they've already kind of screwed it up, because you lose that cute, innocent puppy love part of it, because Rand's already been banging Egwene.
Yeah, true.
So you've already lost some of it. Even if they don't completely screw it up, even if they have Rand and Elayne meet and initiate their relationship in the same way as the book, which I'm quite sure you're right, they won't, they'll screw it up. they've already screwed it up by changing Rand into some, modern stupid teen drama character instead of the character he's supposed to be, which
Well,
is
that's an
from a
important
different
point.
time.
Yeah, that's an important point. Think back to when you were a virgin and your first girlfriend and the anticipation leading up to it. It's a lot different than a new girlfriend that after you've already had 3 or 4 girlfriends that you've had intimate relationships with, that tension there. Yeah, there's still the passion, but the tension isn't there.
Yeah. Yeah. And I lost my train of thought.
Well, I think we reached what we needed to reach with that, though.
Yeah. And the last part of chapter 8 there, page 166. I like that we switch back to Egwene for a few pages so that she can run into Matt. And is this something dumb, or is this the pattern and Tavernness that she tells him about the doorways?
I would say, since we're in one of those ebb and flows of the pattern, that is probably a lot Tavern. But it is one of those that's it's not an obvious pull because she is still young and naive at this point.
Yeah, I guess so. Page 170 there at the end of the chapter, she does say, maybe the answers you seek are inside this one, but you must not try it before Moiraine says you can. And maybe it's a little bit a mix of naivety and overconfidence, or maybe she just doesn't know Matt well enough anymore because they've been apart so long that she would think that because she told him that he'll actually do that and not use it. Think on it, but don't use it unless Moiraine says you can.
Well, I think she says that because she knows him.
Well, that's why she says it, but I do think it is amusing and perhaps a little bit odd that she thinks he'll actually listen.
Well, yeah, it won't actually push him in that direction.
Yeah.
But that's where her and Nyneave differ. Nyneave would have handled that a little better.
Yeah. As I say that out loud, it occurs to me that that's probably because, and we do see her act differently a few books down the road here. Egwene has fully embraced her life as an Aes Sedai. This is her life. This is what she wants. She doesn't, I don't think she understands at all Matt's antipathy towards the tower and Aes Sedai and the power, and how much he distrusts, if not outright loathes, all that he acts around Nyneave and Elayne differently because he barely even sees them as Aes Sedai. In fact, I don't think he sees them as that at all yet because they're still only accepted. And then even when they become full Aes Sedai, he still treats them differently than he does others, because to him, they're not really Aes Sedai, they're his friends from the village he grew up in. And I think a big part of the reason Egwene does what she does here is that she just has that blind spot.
Trying to see, because we need to get to the questions before we stop.
Okay.
But seeing if there's anything important about Matt going in this next chapter. I didn't get this far in my skimming.
This is, well, the next 2 chapters are so he doesn't do this very often. I kind of wish he would have done it a little bit more, where the opening to chapter 9 isn't really, it's one of the very few times that it's not really from a particular character's perspective, that it's actually just Jordan, the narrator, narrating, just kind of giving you a synopsis of 3 days passed with heat and damp, blah, 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 blah. And he just kind of quickly goes over what the characters are doing in these 3 days rather than following them around or doing it from one particular character's perspective. I feel like there are times he could have done that more to move things along better.
It might have been useful at the end when he knew he was near the end of his days and trying to accelerate the story.
We see something that I think we've seen just glimmers of it before. But on page 178, 179, Rand loses his temper big time because he can't stomach the way these kinds of people behave. So I think a combination of his orders not being followed versus the disgusting way these page 179, 2,000 Terran levies. He has an interest in forcing his attentions on a woman who won't look at him. Grain for ships, I said. No soldiers, and certainly no bloody taurine. And then you will go to Bearland by tomorrow midday. You will have offered her the treaty I want, or by sunset, I'll hang both of you. So we see him really losing his temper, that he has a temper.
We got the first
we haven't really
glimpses of
seen.
it when he was in Karheim,
Mhm.
throwing letters into the fireplace because he was pissed off.
Yeah. So he's not as rash as Matt, but he's not the gentle giant of Perrin. As we've said, he's kind of in the middle. But I think because he wants to be, or thinks he needs to be, more Perrin-like, I think he does really keep that bottled in. And that's when that, I mean, everyone's had that at some point, that you keep something bottled in and then it pops.
I was going to bring that up when we were talking about Moiraine, because she's bottled in her emotion for 20 years, basically.
That's a good point. All right, so chapter 11 is, wait, is this where? So yeah, chapter 9 and 10 is the attack on the stone. Selene shows up, and this is where she finally reveals herself to Lews Therin.
And again, makes it clear that she has her own plans.
Mm-hmm. Do you have any thoughts on the attack on the stone? I mean, it's mostly an action chapter until you get to the very end, where it's a little disturbing.
No, that is the most important part of it.
Yeah, that first, that with Kalendor in his hands, he has a ludicrous amount of power, and with that power, he does have instinctual abilities, and he does something that is shocking to Moiraine. And Moiraine is one of, at this point in the story, what is she, like top 3 channelers in raw power?
Mm-hmm.
Not counting the girls who are still just accepted, but are probably more powerful already in raw power than Moiraine.
I can tell you how powerful she is.
because there's another really powerful one that we haven't met yet and won't meet for a little while, and is so old that everyone thinks she's dead. So anyone who's rereading knows who I'm talking about. And Swan is really powerful, is one of the most powerful. But I know Moiraine is up there. And she has the full training and knowledge of having spent 10-ish years as novice and accepted, and then now almost 20 as a full sister, and has all the experience of being out in the world. So she knows some impressive weaves, and this, what Rand does here without even knowing it, is incredible and absolutely shocking to her.
Well, she's not even close to Nyneave.
Yeah.
Let's see how close she is to Egwene. Yeah, Egwene's about halfway between Nyneave and Moiraine. Sorry, they actually have everybody's power level listed. And
do you have any thoughts on what he does to the poor little dead girl?
well, that's just it's a this is where that's why I brought this up when he chopped that lady's head off. If he wasn't in a certain state, it would have mattered more to him, because this shows the other side of him.
That he becomes pretty unhinged here, and to the point of creepiness, and you see what that amount of power, what can happen when it is in the hands of someone who is on edge,
Unhinged. Yeah, well, this is a part of the corruption of power that isn't the taint. You start to believe you can do anything, and
yeah,
he just did something, like you said, that nobody could believe he could
and
do.
there is an element of spoiler talk to this, because there may be another thing going on here, but I don't think so. I think this is, to your point, more about just power corrupts, and absolute power is kind of neat. I mean, corrupts absolutely, and this is, he just did something incredibly powerful. I mean, all by himself, with just a couple of minutes of concentration and work, was able to send out basically death lightning to hunt down all of the shadow spawn in the stone, which is about as big as a small town. I mean, it's a big effing fortress. And he just did this. And so now he thinks he can do anything.
Well, in a way that it's almost organic, because he can't see all these nooks and crannies where the spawn are. It searches them out. All right. Well, Moiraine and Elayne are exactly the same strength.
I forgot she was really powerful too. Yeah.
Yeah. I'll quit being distracted by that.
Okay.
Let's take a quick bathroom break, conclude this part, and then go into spoilers.
Okay.
Well, we decided to just go on to spoilers because it's a little busy coming up. Yeah, this is a good stopping place. So for those listening that are reading for the first time, we're gonna. I'm almost going to the end of the book with some of my books with some of my spoilers. So definitely shelf this one till you've gotten all the way through. All right, let's start with your page 126 you wanted to talk about, which was
Moiraine knowing the face of her husband.
Yeah, I didn't quite get that from here because we know she hasn't gone through the doorways yet.
That's where I was confused, because I was thinking that either these doorways, she wouldn't have asked about that as her 3 questions.
Her accepted test.
I was thinking that she must have seen this in the Reread doorways when she goes through there as one of her possible futures. She already knows. I think Min must have seen a vision that we don't know about when
That's
she
a
saw,
possibility. Yeah.
because she had, Moiraine had, we know from that opening scene in Barlon that Min got a good look at them all and was questioned by Moiraine about it. And we never saw that because we never got that from their perspectives. All we saw is when Rand was talking to her. So we got what she saw about him and a few of the others, like Nyneave, that she's part of this. So, but she got a good look at them all. So I think the most probable answer is that she already knows from a viewing of Min that she is going to marry Thom, which makes it very odd and curious what happens here in a few chapters when she sends Thom off to Tanchico to help out the girls to get him out of her way.
Well, remember, in this world of fate and threads and everything, and Min's always come true, it's comforting to know that, because she can send Thom off knowing that this thing will happen in some way, shape, or form.
You're right, because she tells him that, because he tries to say that I'm an old man and Tanchico is dangerous. Why would I go there? And one of the things she does to try and convince him is to tell him that I tell you, and under the 3 O's, you know it's true, you will not die in Tanchico, because she knows that they're fated to be married at some point.
131 was the next page I wrote down.
Oh, was that the yeah.
Oh,
So,
the prophecy. Which in a reread, it's pretty I don't, even in the first read, I kind of got where this one was going because of all the talk of spears. And
so
of course I didn't know what the Shadow Sworn.
Chains the Shadow Sworn to his will has to be the end of this book. That's why I think this whole verse is referring to the end to this book, but I'm not sure about each stanza, because change the Shadow Sworn to his will has to be Asmodine, right?
Yeah, it's got to be.
And from the city lost and forsaken, Rudine leads the spears to war. The spears are the Aiel, that's how they refer to themselves. Breaks the spheres and makes them see truth long hidden, because he tells them the secrets of Rudine. The only thing I'm not sure of is that opening stanza, power of the shadow made human flesh wake into turmoil, strife, and ruin. What the heck is that?
Is that the Forsaken coming out of their prison, including the one he ends up chaining?
I mean, it could be, but I thought they were all already out by this point. The reborn one, marked and bleeding, dances the sword in dreams and mist. Unless these
could it be Shidar Heron?
Unless these two verses are referring to the end of Dragon Reborn, and then it goes into what he will do next.
I think that's it. I think this is referring to, because we're slowly getting a trickle out of the Forsaken, realistically.
Because the reborn one, marked and bleeding, dances the sword in dreams and mist, that could refer to the end of the Dragon Reborn, because that's what he was doing.
Mm-hmm.
Was he was having that running battle with Balsamon in the world of dreams, and he was dancing the sword because he was wielding Kalendor while he was doing it.
Yeah, but that's one sentence though. Dances a sword in the dreams of mist and chains the Shadow Sworn to his will.
Yeah. that does seem to go together, but I didn't.
And remember, him and Asmodean fight in the mist of Rhydian. I think at this point, the Forsaken are being released because remember, Ishi was partially captured.
The most confusing thing to me, though, is that very first line, because power of shadow made human flesh. The first thing I think of instantly is Shidar Heron.
It could be too.
Well, except he's not human flesh. He's just made flesh.
Oh,
that
yeah,
would make
true.
sense.
That's
but
true.
made human flesh, that doesn't make sense.
Well, maybe we'll get some insight.
Yeah. So if somebody else has an idea of how to make all that flow together, because
and also just pin it in your head if something comes up later and you're like,
because the second half to me, that the only thing I think that can mean is the end of this book.
Mm-hmm.
It's just that it just first half that
lays it
makes
out
me
step
scratch
by
my head.
step. Yeah.
Yeah.
It could be more, like I said, it could be my simple answer, or it could be something, something more. All right. Do you have any more before I get on to my two that intrigue you?
No, those were the two spoiler things I had, and then the two you mentioned.
Let me check the comments real quick.
Oh yeah, there was so I think the only one we really need to address, Scott gave his 2 cents. But then the only kind of open-ended question mark one was his last comment there about the bubbles of evil. Rand and Lan practicing the sword on the top of in Foldera. I don't know that was a bubble of evil. I'd never thought of that before, but it could have been.
I agree with him there. And
yeah.
I believe I responded to that one. Hold on.
I don't have that. I've got damn sense, whoever you are. So he replied to that with the little town in the Great Hunt with the visions and the flies,
which we talked about. And I had said that was probably I guess I never hit enter on my response.
I've never been certain of that one. I heard one reader attribute that to some sort of trap by Padan Fain. Others say it's a dream shard by Baalzamon. No, I think I'm 99% certain that was something Padan Fain did, because we see it again in Winter's Heart when Lan and Rand go to kill Fain, and he gets kind of trapped in a similar time loop vision where he's seeing those two guys that he's after, two of the Ashaman that he's out to kill. And he sees them walking in and talking, and he like sees it a couple of times. And he's so somehow Fain has this weird power. And I thought that at some point Fain even thinks it, and one of the few points of view we have from him about he has these weird powers that he doesn't even know what they are or where they came from.
That makes sense.
That it's either something to do with his connection with the Dark One, or something his connection to do with Mordeth, or possibly the fact that those two kind of merged and created something new.
Okay, so do you want me to talk about Matt or the yin yang first?
Let's just talk about Matt first, because the yin yang could get into a rambling philosophical.
Okay, so this actually goes into some of the other comments we have addressed about the Tavern nature of the boys. So I was looking through some Robert Jordan interviews. Let me go ahead and just share screen here. And this is one answer about the Tavern nature of the boys. He talked about it ebbing and flowing, which was the original question. But then he also says that for one thing, no one is born Tavern. This is Jordan's own words. Yeah. Rand and Matt and Perrin only became Tavern just before Moiraine appeared. Which, remember, we talked about going into the hills and everything. But no, it was a matter of, according to Jordan, the pattern just selecting them at the time that was needed. And then he goes into, it's not a sentient thing. It's kind of like a logic device with a feedback loop.
Yeah, I like the way he describes that. But that does remind me. No, we get a hint of that by someone. I think it's one of the times Loyal is describing and defining it that I didn't, in hindsight, you can see you're not born as it, but I believe from the way Loyal describes it, you are ta'veren until you're done doing what the pattern needs you to do. So there is an end to it. You're not ta'veren for your whole life.
Well,
the way it's
unless you're one
described.
of the heroes, because then you're stuck in that loop.
Well, no, but then you're bound to the pattern. You're bound to the horn, if that's what you mean. But when the pattern is done with that feedback, with that correction, then you stop being ta'veren. You may live out the rest of your life and then die and be reconnected to the pattern, reconnected to the horn, whatever. But
okay, so going into why the pattern would select these three boys, we were talking about the personalities are perfect for what Rand needs, right? It wasn't just that they were born within that same time frame, because they mentioned other kids that were born within a close enough time frame.
They were just the closest to.
And when we look at the end of the book, what Rand really needed from these two boys, but men now, was he needed someone to rebuild, and he needed someone to be the deciding factor in the last battle. And so Perrin was the protector in the last battle. He protected Rand.
Well, not only that, you say rebuild, and that's a good point, because we don't see the rebuilding, because that's
we see something that happens,
but we see it started because Perrin is the key to making the piece of the dragon happen, because he's the one that has that key thought that ultimately leads to everyone finally accepting it, and including the Aiel, which is what was the kind of the necessary lacking component that would have made it fall apart.
And and there's parallel. Jordan goes into the parallels of who influenced who, but it's the fact that Matt is this the personality we keep bringing up, where he can adjust to any situation. He can ad lib. He can improv. He can improv the battle. When we get to later in this book where he gets the memories, that's not why he's a great general. Those are just combinations in his boxing, right? Floyd Mayweather doesn't go into a match going, I'm going to throw a right hook, number 3 combination here, number 10 combination here, he just has those all in his hip pocket, and whatever moment comes up, they're ready to go.
And he uses that within a game plan that he has come up with through studying his opponent,
which is ever changing throughout the whole match.
But the game plan is an outline.
So Perrin is the Mozart while Matt is the jazz musician, right?
That's a good way to describe it. Yeah,
he's just jamming.
Yeah, the memories that come at the end of the book are just him getting plugged into the matrix, and Keanu wouldn't have been as awesome at kung fu. Whoa, I know kung fu. Well, that's great, but if you're a 400-pound elephant, you're not going to be able to do very much with it. So it's giving you the knowledge, but you have to have the base ability to be able to use it. Now, and Perrin, Matt had the base ability.
Perrin was always the builder. He just, when he became ta'veren, he was just helped along by the wolf. The wolf allowed him to be extremely dangerous by instinct, because wolves and other animals have the technical term, imprinting into their DNA. Like a duck will follow another duck as soon as it's born. It's imprinted. So wolves are like that as well. They know how to hamstring. They know instinctually how to.
That's a good point. They're also very protective of their pack. That is one of their driving instincts, is to pack together and protect the pack.
So the wolf was what Perrin needed to survive, but what he needed to be for Rand was already his personality. So the pattern picked him because of his personality. And same for Matt. The memories are what he needs to be able to successfully do what he's doing, but his personality was what Rand needed.
Yeah, I also I hadn't thought I'm getting near the end of the series now in my reread, and it it makes that you see it through the stories when they go off and they do their own plot lines, but then when you get to the very end, it becomes abundantly clear. Oh yeah, he has to have three. It has to be three because when Rand goes in to ultimately face the Dark One, he is locked into that, literally locked in. He cannot move. He cannot see what's going on outside of his bubble in that confrontation. So he has to have someone watch his back
which is
because he
Perrin,
literally cannot.
and he has to have someone to handle the big sneaky that was the Dark One's minion Demandred, who
Yes,
nobody knew where he was,
that's what you're. Yeah,
and they were actually winning the last battle in the battle sense until he showed up.
and then yeah, they get absolutely wrecked.
Yeah,
Uh,
he came with the big sneaky,
so
and it
So
was
Rand
Matt's
has
ability
to
to
face the
adjust.
Dark One,
Yeah,
and he's going to be locked in. So he needs someone to protect him, which is Perrin, and he needs someone to lead the battle part of the last battle, the war part of the last battle, because he can't, because again, he's locked in.
but not only that. Remember, Matt wasn't needed till Demandred showed up. The great generals had it down pretty well.
Yeah.
Well, except for the fact that they were getting their dreams messed with as well. So those were the two big sneakies that Matt had to come in and account for.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that the generals were compromised and that Demandred came out of nowhere with an army that nobody knew about and knew how it worked, and he had to adjust on the fly. And without it, the general that could adjust on the fly, and that was unknown, they don't win that part of the battle. So again, his personality type, the improv, is what was needed. The rest was just the combos he can throw in the match. Now the yin yang, you talked about the power of the male and the female. No one put it together. Rand and Nyneave did. That's how they got rid of the taint.
Mm-hmm.
They figured out
That's
it
true.
needed to be a male and female, but also
Not
Nyneave.
only that, but then figured out how to use that push and pull together. Yeah.
Well, and so there's another instance of it, the healing of stilling and gentling. Nyneave heals Logain and he's all the way healed. She
Yeah.
can't fully heal the girls.
But I don't know if anyone figures that out.
Flynn did. When
Well, no, Flynn figured us out how to heal it independently on his own, using his own techniques.
I thought there was an interaction between either Nyneave or one of the other women, maybe Catswain, that where Flynn was healing these women all the way, but Nyneave couldn't. And Nyneave healed Logain all the way. And I don't know if any of the men tried to heal other men, but someone, I'm wanting to say they mentioned they figured out that
Okay. I'll have to.
a woman was needed to complete a man and a man was needed to complete a woman.
I'll have to keep an eye out and see if I noticed that.
Dangerous topics in today's political environment. But
yes, we are definitely not woke. We are reading problematic. Make sure you have hard copies of these because they're going to get banned at some point.
I guess I need to replace that book too that just fell apart when we were going through this.
Yeah, I have a couple of those, but they're holding together enough that I haven't lost any chunks of them yet. Well, do you have any further spoiler thoughts or closing thoughts on these chapters?
There was, did a prophecy come up? Yeah, we kind of skimmed over. He went over the Heron prophecies again.
Oh yeah, and right before Lanfear shows up.
Now, when is it? Was it the end of Dragon Reborn, or is it later in this book that Rourke shows his?
It was the end of Dragon Reborn where he shows the tattoo. So we have gotten a glimpse of that, but nobody has mentioned it since. But that actually that's a good point because there's another blind spot for Moiraine. So we know, since we're in spoiler talk here, that that's got to be at least part of the influence of Rand of why he chooses to go to the waste. is that he knows something of this. I think he knows he needs to be marked.
And it's awful convenient that someone has a mark that he knows he possibly needs.
Well, I say that, but then he hasn't figured it out yet.
Okay, we'll get to that in the next reading. So
yeah, but he comes to this decision on his own too, because remember, Matt doesn't want to have to go through the stone again, because that was not pleasant last time they did it. And he says that maybe that's just what all those snaky people say is go to Rudine. And Rand looks at him and says, that's not what they told me. So it wasn't one of his questions. So he figured this out on his own and was part of his own plans to get the Aiel behind him. But I do wonder at what point does he realize he needs to go to Rudine? Because he doesn't here. Now that you mention it, I'm looking back at it and it's from his perspective.
Just the fact that he brought that specific prophecy up to Moiraine, maybe he put the 2 and 2 together with the spears.
Well, here on page 180, he's no, she brought that prophecy up to him to say the spears are the tyrant spears and you need to lead them to war. But that may have helped his thought process because he was already looking at them. Oh no, you're right, because she mentioned it. The way she phrases that is that she mentioned it, but he actually quoted the passage. So he had already been thinking about it. But he's thinking about the heron and the dragon prophecy in his head. Twice and twice shall he be marked, twice to live and twice to die. Once the heron to set his path, twice the heron to name him true. Once the dragon for a moment's lost, twice the dragon for the price he must pay. But if the herons named him true, what need for dragons? For that matter, what was a dragon? The only dragon he had ever heard of was Lews Therin Telamon. Lews Therin Kinslayer had been the dragon. The dragon was the Kinslayer, except now there was himself. But he could not be marked with himself. Perhaps the figure on the banner of the dragon. Not even Aes Sedai seemed to know what that creature was. So even though he's seen the mark, actually, hold on a second. I just had a thought.
I have no idea what his thought is going to be.
Was he actually in the room when Ruark did that?
I thought they were all together.
I don't think he's there.
I thought that's when he was talking about I killed him, and he names the Dark One.
That was the. That's a good point. All right, so chapter 56, People of the Dragon, the very last chapter. Because it's going through, it's from Matt's perspective, and he sees Ruark in the room. Yeah, because I don't think he's there, because he thinks, page 668 in the paperback, he had seen Rand just once the night before, striding along a hall with Calendor in his hand, surrounded by a dozen veiled Aiel and trailing a cloud of Terrans, a knot of defenders of the stone, and most of the few surviving High Lords. The High Lords at least seemed to think Rand would need them to help him rule the world. The Aiel kept everyone back with sharp looks, though, and spears if need be. They surely believed Rand was the dragon, though they called him he who comes with the dawn. There were nearly 200 Aiel in the stone. They had lost a third of their number in the fighting, but they had killed or captured 10 times as many defenders. So Ruark is there because he sees Ruark sitting there just reading a book. The girls are there. Moiraine is there. Perrin is not there because Moiraine mentions that he was dealing with other things, and she'll go check on him in a bit. They're going through all this, and I don't see Rand.
Well,
so it is odd that unless he shows, because you're not supposed to reveal those things. You're not supposed to even talk about Rudine. The only and I'd originally thought that it was kind of Tavernness pulling him along and making him reveal this, although it still could be because Matt is there, or it may have just been because Moiraine is there and they at this point have a reverence for Aes Sedai. Oh yeah, Rand's not the one who says I killed it's Matt. But he's dead. Rand killed him. I saw the body. So Rand hasn't actually seen the dragons. It's possible one of them would have told him about it, but you know, as the meme says, lack of communication. So that is curious, and something I'd never really noticed and thought of before is what exactly leads Rand to the waste, Rudine specifically. Why does he think he needs to go in when he doesn't know about the markings? Actually, this is going to come up. Well, we will ponder this more because this will come up when we get to the chapters of him going through Rudine and then coming out marked.
Okay, I just figured out how to read the female version of the power strength. So, okay, so Swan, Moiraine, and Elaida are basically the strongest living that they know of, because we don't know about Cadsuane yet.
Yeah.
In this, so they had a 1 through 60 scale, but then when they discovered Elayne, Egwene, and Nyneave, they had to bump the scale. So their power ranking system with the known that were already Aes Sedai became 13 through 72. And so then everything under that is stronger than what was considered the strongest. So Moiraine, Swan, and Elaida were the strongest known living Aes Sedai at the time.
So I was right in my guess of top 3.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, that's all I have. Well, we can put a pin in the Rudine talk, because that is, I mean, that's coming up here in the next episode or two when we talk about these, because we're getting to that point, and then, you know, as soon as he gets there, he goes through it. So we'll have more to talk about there as we ponder how and why you went.
All right. Well, now I got to relearn how to evaluate an ankle after it's rolled. So one of my clients rolled his ankle playing basketball, landed on another foot.
Ow. That's exciting.
Kind of like we did with the Saquon Barkley thing, only I've got to check to see if the ligaments are still attached. I cannot diagnose nor treat injury, but I can at least let them know if they need to go to the doctor.
Yep. Well, depending on how swollen and purple it is.
Well, that's why it's today. It actually happened last Friday, but it spent the last several days getting the swelling to go down. So,
well, that'll be exciting.
Yay. All right. All you Wheel Time people, comments, like, subscribe. No medical advice given this time. No disclaimers needed other than keep reading, have a little fun with it, and let's keep overthinking everything.
Absolutely.
All right.